Thanks for tuning in to Vows Shattered. Give a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell for more betrayal stories. Ethan trudged into his modest suburban home, the weariness of another long day etched into his features. His briefcase, bulging with case files, landed on the hallway table with a soft thud. The aroma of freshly baked cookies, Melissa's specialty, wafted from the kitchen. But instead of the usual comforting scene, Ethan's ears caught a hushed, hurried tone from Melissa. Her voice landed on the hallway table with a soft, hurried tone from Melissa. The start of something troubling began to rub the hip muscles of his already wary, sensitive body. But not before something. "I know, Daniel," she said, her words laced with an unfamiliar fervor. "Ethan doesn't understand the sacrifices I'm making. It's for us, our future." The name struck Ethan like a jolt of electricity. Daniel, her co-worker. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Ethan's first instinct was to step back, but the pain and confusion kept him rooted in place. As he crept closer, the faint creak of the wooden floor betrayed his presence. Melissa's voice stopped mid-sentence. She turned, startled, her eyes locking onto Ethan's. "Who are you talking to?" he asked, his voice calm, betraying none of the storm raging inside him. Melissa hesitated, her lips parting and closing, before she finally forced a smile. "Just a work call. Nothing important." Her dismissive tone tried to brush aside his question. But Ethan wasn't convinced. Later that evening, Ethan replayed the conversation in his mind, dissecting every word, every hesitation. Melissa had been distant for months. Extra work meetings, late nights, a constant preoccupation with her phone. The realization dawned slowly, but unmistakable. Melissa was lying. That night, unable to sleep, Ethan sifted through Melissa's social media accounts, texts and emails, an invasion of privacy he'd never considered before. What he found confirmed his worst fears. Her messages to Daniel weren't just casual or professional. They were personal, intimate. They spoke of dreams Ethan had never shared with her, plans for a future that excluded him and their children. The betrayal was a blade in his chest, twisting deeper with every word he read. But his love for Emma and Liam, their innocent faces, oblivious to the growing rift in their family, gave him clarity. He wouldn't confront Melissa in anger. No, he would protect his children first and foremost. Ethan's plan began to form in the quiet hours before dawn. It wasn't about revenge. It was about ensuring his children's happiness and stability. He'd always been the problem solver, the anchor in times of turbulence. Now, he needed to use every ounce of that storm Melissa had brought into their lives. As the sun rose, Ethan poured himself a cup of coffee, staring out the window at the backyard where Emma and Liam often played. A new resolve hardened within him. He would not let Melissa's betrayal destroy the family he had built. She may have chosen her ambition and Daniel over them, but Ethan would choose truth and love, and he would make sure everyone saw her true colors when the time came. With that, the foundation for Ethan's path to reclaim his life and protect his children was laid. Ethan spent the next few days navigating the delicate balance of maintaining normalcy at home while quietly gathering the pieces of his plan. He woke early to make breakfast for Emma and Liam, ensuring they felt safe and loved amidst the undercurrent of tension. His children's laughter, untainted by the looming storm, gave him the strength to master an even greater task than making the people he loved at home, his sons and their wives, ignoring the people whom he loved and hoped, his sons and their wives, and all living for the presence of all others. Melissa continued her charade, greeting Ethan with the same routine smiles and half-hearted conversations. She had grown bolder in her indiscretions, her phone often buzzing late at night with what she claimed were work updates. Each notification added to the growing pile of evidence Ethan had been meticulously documented. One evening, after putting Emma and Liam to bed, Ethan carefully retrieved a small recording device he had hidden in his office drawer. He had never envisioned himself resorting to such measures, but he knew the stakes were too high to take risks. Placing the device discreetly in the living room, where Melissa often took her late-night calls, he ensured that no word of her secret plans would escape him. Over the next week, Melissa's conversations with Daniel painted a clearer picture of her intentions. She spoke openly about her frustrations with Ethan, dismissing his sacrifices for their family as inadequate compared to her ambitions. "I've done all the heavy lifting," she said one night. "Ethan's too content to play the perfect dad. He doesn't see the bigger picture. But we do, Daniel. We deserve this." Ethan clenched his fists as he listened to the recording later that night, his heart heavy with betrayal. Melissa had justified her actions so thoroughly to herself that she seemed oblivious to the pain her choices might inflict on their children. She and Daniel were planning more than just an affair. They were crafting a future built on deceit and ambition, one that excluded Ethan entirely. At work, Ethan's colleagues noticed a subtle shift in him. His usual friendly demeanor gave way to a quieter, more introspective presence. His boss, an old friend who had known Ethan for years, pulled him aside one afternoon. "Everything okay at home?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. Ethan offered a small, reassuring smile. "Just a lot on my plate right now, but I'll figure it out." Despite his turmoil, Ethan refused to let his emotions compromise his professional responsibilities. Instead, he channeled his energy into crafting the next phase of his plan. He began researching family law, quietly consulting a lawyer to understand his rights and the best path forward. Every piece of advice he received further cemented his resolve to protect Emma and Liam at all costs. Meanwhile, Ethan decided to test Melissa's commitment to their family. He suggested a spontaneous weekend trip to the countryside, a chance for the four of them to reconnect. Melissa hesitated but ultimately agreed, though Ethan noticed her reluctance. During the trip, he observed her interactions with Emma and Liam. Her smiles seemed forced, her heart already elsewhere. The trip was bittersweet for Ethan. Watching Emma and Liam light up at the simple joys of hiking and roasting marshmallows reminded him of the life they deserved. But Melissa's detachment confirmed what he already knew. Her betrayal wasn't a fleeting mistake. It was a deliberate choice that had left their family fractured. Returning home, Ethan's determination reached a new level. He organized a surprise family event for the following weekend, inviting Melissa's closest friends and colleagues, under the guise of celebrating a personal milestone. When Melissa agreed to attend, Ethan secretly arranged for the event to coincide with a meeting she had scheduled with Daniel. He knew she would choose Daniel, and he intended to use that decision as the final piece of evidence. In the days leading up to the event, Ethan maintained a calm facade, even as he finalized the details of his plan. He enlisted the help of a trusted friend to manage the logistics, ensuring that nothing would slip through the cracks. This wasn't just about confronting Melissa. It was about revealing her true priorities to everyone who mattered in her life. As the weekend approached, Ethan watched Melissa grow more distracted, her lies growing thinner with each passing day. He could feel the threads of her carefully constructed web beginning to unravel, and when the time came, he knew he would be ready to pull the rug out from under her, exposing the truth in a way she could no longer deny. The day of the family event arrived, a crisp Saturday morning with sunshine pouring through the windows. Ethan moved through the house with quiet efficiency, preparing for what would be the most pivotal day of his life. Melissa seemed more preoccupied than usual, her phone glued to her hand, her responses clipped. She kissed Ethan on the cheek as she left the kitchen, muttering something about finalizing a presentation. He knew exactly where she was headed. Ethan spent the morning decorating the house for the event, creating a warm, celebratory atmosphere. Balloons adorned the corners of the living room, and a banner reading "Family First," celebrating togetherness, hung above the dining table. Emma and Liam, delighted by the activity, buzzed around helping their dad. "What, are we having a party, Daddy?" Emma asked as she taped a streamer to the wall. "Because family is important," Ethan replied, ruffling her hair. "And I want everyone to know how special ours is." By noon, guests began to trickle in. Melissa's colleagues, friends from their community, and a few of Ethan's closest allies. The mood was light, filled with laughter and polite chatter, but Ethan felt the weight of the hours ahead pressing on him. He discreetly placed cameras in key locations around the house to capture the event, knowing that every detail would matter in the confrontation to come. As guests mingled, Ethan received a text from Melissa. "Running late, something came up at work. Be there soon." Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line. The calm facade he had maintained for weeks didn't waver, but his resolve hardened. It was the very excuse he had anticipated, one she had used countless times to justify her absences. "Where's Mommy?" Liam asked, his voice tinged with disappointment. "She'll be here soon," Ethan said, kneeling to meet his son's eyes. "But remember, no matter what happens today, I'm always here for you and your sister. Always." Liam nodded, sensing the seriousness in his father's tone, but unable to grasp its full meaning. Meanwhile, across town, Melissa sat in a sleek cafe booth, her laptop open but ignored. Daniel lounged opposite her, his jacket draped casually over the seat. "Ethan's predictable," Melissa said, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "He'll play the doting husband and throw his little party. He doesn't realize it's all for show." Daniel smirked. "And by the time he does, we'll be miles ahead. New life, new opportunities. This is the right move, Melissa." As she nodded, Melissa's phone buzzed with a notification. A picture of Emma and Liam playing in the backyard during the party, sent by one of the guests. Her smile faltered for a moment, guilt briefly surfacing before she pushed it aside. Back at the house, Ethan had begun the event's highlight, a video presentation of family memories. He gathered everyone into the living room, Emma and Liam nestled beside him on the couch. Images of vacations, school milestones, and birthdays flashed across the screen, drawing murmurs of appreciation from the crowd. "This is what family means to me," Ethan said, his voice steady but charged with emotion. "It's about being present, about making sacrifices for the people you love." A few guests glanced at the empty seat meant for Melissa, whispers circulating among them. Ethan didn't address her absence yet. He didn't need to. An hour later, Melissa finally arrived, her smile bright, but her steps hesitant as she entered the bustling living room. "Sorry I'm late," she said breezily, brushing past Ethan to greet a colleague. Ethan's expression didn't change as he watched her slip seamlessly into the crowd, her charm masking the duplicity he knew all too well. "Melissa," he said, raising his voice slightly to catch her attention. The room quieted as everyone turned toward him. She froze, her smile faltering as she met Ethan's gaze. "Yes, we've been waiting for you," he said, gesturing toward the dining table where a cake waited to be cut. "But before we celebrate, there's something I need to share." Ethan stepped to the center of the room, his presence commanding attention. From his pocket, he retrieved his phone and tapped a button. The sound of Melissa's voice filled the room, her words unmistakable as the recording played. "Ethan doesn't understand the sacrifices I'm making. It's for us, our future." Gasps rippled through the guests as the recording continued, detailing Melissa's disdain for her family life and her plans with Daniel. "Melissa?" Melissa's face paled, her eyes darting toward the door, but she was rooted in place by the weight of the crowd's stares. Ethan let the recording end before speaking, his voice calm but firm. This is what my wife thinks of the family we've built together, and this is the man she thinks will help her build a better one." He stepped aside, revealing a photograph of Melissa and Daniel, taken earlier that day, displayed on a tablet for everyone to see. The room erupted into murmurs, some in disbelief, others in anger. Melissa's closest friends looked away, their expressions a mix of shock and betrayal. "You lied to me, to our children, and to everyone in this room," Ethan said, his voice unwavering. "Today, that ends." Melissa tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She turned to Daniel for support, only to find him slipping out the door, unwilling to face the fallout. The aftermath was swift. Ethan addressed the crowd once more, thanking them for their support and emphasizing his commitment to his children's well-being. Emma and Liam clung to him as the guests began to leave, their young minds struggling to process the day's events. Ethan knelt beside them, pulling them into a comforting embrace. "No matter what happens, we're going to be okay, I promise." As the sun set, Ethan stood at the doorway, watching Melissa retreat to her car. Her life as she knew it was crumbling, while Ethan's path forward was finally clear. Melissa sat in the dim light of the guest room she had claimed after Ethan's confrontation. The once luxurious home she had so proudly displayed to Daniel now felt suffocating, a hollow shell of the life she had thought she controlled. Her phone buzzed incessantly with texts from friends and colleagues who had witnessed the fallout, knowing they carried equal parts scorn and pity. Ethan, however, moved with purpose in the aftermath of the explosive event. He had spent years suppressing his own needs to support Melissa's ambitions, yet her betrayal had flipped a switch. It wasn't just anger or sorrow driving him now. It was clarity. For too long, he had been Melissa's safety net, the dependable figure she could lean on while she chased her desires. That safety net was gone. The morning after the confrontation, Ethan rose early. He sat at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee, and reviewed the evidence he had meticulously compiled over the past weeks. The recordings, emails, and text messages Melissa had carelessly left behind painted a damning picture of deceit and negligence, not only as a wife, but also as a mother. Ethan's lawyer had assured him that these would be invaluable in any custody battle. "Daddy?" Emma's small voice pulled him from his thoughts. Ethan turned to see his daughter standing in the doorway, her stuffed bear clutched tightly. "Hey, sweetheart, did you sleep okay?" She shook her head and climbed onto his lap. "Why's Mummy mad at you?" Ethan wrapped his arms around her, the warmth of her small frame grounding him. "Mommy and I are just figuring out some grown-up things. But it's not your fault, and I'll always be here for you and Liam. You know that, right?" Emma nodded, but didn't seem entirely convinced. Ethan kissed her forehead, silently vowing to shield her and Liam from as much of this storm as possible. Melissa emerged later that morning, her face pale, her hair unkempt. She hovered in the doorway of the kitchen as if unsure she had the right to enter. The tension between them was palpable. "Ethan," she began, her voice hesitant, "can we talk?" He met her gaze without flinching. "About what?" "About everything. About how we got here." Ethan gestured for her to sit, but kept his expression neutral. "Go ahead. Talk." Melissa hesitated, as though searching for words that would magically erase her actions. I didn't mean for things to get so complicated. Daniel and I... "Stop," Ethan said, his tone cutting, but not loud. "I don't want excuses, Melissa. What I want is to understand how you could put your ambitions and your affair above our family." Her eyes filled with tears, but Ethan refused to be swayed. "You don't understand," she said. "I've sacrificed so much for this family, for my career, and I haven't." Ethan's voice rose slightly. "Every late-night shift, every skipped vacation, every personal dream I put on hold, it was all for you, Melissa, for Emma, for Liam. Don't pretend you're the only one who made sacrifices." Melissa fell silent, her tears streaming freely now. "I didn't know how to balance it all," she admitted finally. "I felt trapped." "Trapped?" Ethan repeated, incredulous. "You had a family that adored you, and you decided to throw it away for a co-worker who doesn't even have the decency to stay when things fall apart." Melissa flinched at the mention of Daniel's abandonment. She had tried calling him the previous night, but his responses had been curt, his willingness to involve himself in her mess non-existent. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "No," Ethan corrected, his tone unyielding. "You made choices repeatedly, and those choices have consequences." Ethan spent the following days preparing to reclaim his life, starting with the practicalities. He met with his lawyer to finalize the divorce filings, ensuring he would have strong grounds for custody based on Melissa's neglect and infidelity. His evidence was compelling. From recordings of Melissa's dismissive attitude toward their children, to her absence during critical family moments. At home, Ethan focused on the kids. He helped Emma with her school project and taught Liam how to build a birdhouse in the backyard. The children seemed to sense the shift in their father. They clung to him more than ever, finding solace in his unwavering presence. Melissa, meanwhile, remained isolated in the guest room. She rarely interacted with the children, her shame keeping her at a distance. Ethan allowed it, knowing that her absence only strengthened his case. One evening, as Ethan tucked Liam into bed, his son looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. "Daddy, are you and Mommy going to stop being mad?" Ethan paused, choosing his words carefully. "Liam, sometimes grown-ups have to make big decisions to keep their families safe and happy. But no matter what happens, I'll always love you and Emma, even if Mommy doesn't stay." Liam asked, his voice small. Even then, Ethan said firmly, brushing his son's hair back, nothing will ever change that. By the week's end, Melissa finally broke her silence. She approached Ethan while he was cleaning up after dinner. I want to fix this, she said, desperation etched into her features. Ethan shook his head. The weight of his decision solidified. Melissa, you can't undo what you've done. Our children deserve stability, and they deserve parents who put them first. That's not you right now. Melissa stared at him, her composure crumbling. So, this is it. This is me choosing what's best for Emma and Liam, Ethan said, his voice steady, and for myself. As Melissa retreated once again, Ethan felt a sense of relief. The chains that had bound him to a life of betrayal and compromise were breaking. For the first time in years, he could see a future where his happiness and that of his children came first. The divorce proceedings moved swiftly, aided by the weight of the evidence Ethan had presented. Melissa's initial resistance faltered as the reality of her actions caught up with her. Her lawyer's attempts to negotiate for shared custody and financial support crumbled under the mountain of evidence Ethan had compiled. Her recorded conversations, her dismissive treatment of the children, and her frequent absences. The judge, a stern woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, didn't hide her disapproval. Mrs. Carter, she said just during the final hearing, it is clear from the evidence presented that your priorities have not been your children or your marriage. I see no reason to disrupt the stability Mr. Carter provides. Full custody is awarded to him. Melissa sat frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief. Ethan, meanwhile, remained composed, his focus entirely on ensuring Emma and Liam's future. The following weeks were a whirlwind of adjustments. Ethan and the children settled into a new routine, one that emphasized togetherness. Mornings were no longer hurried and strained. Instead, Ethan made time to sit with the kids over breakfast, listening to their plans for the day. Evenings were filled with homework, bedtime stories, and moments of far too long. Emma, with her inquisitive nature, occasionally asked about Melissa. Will Mommy ever come back? She asked one night as Ethan tucked her into bed. Ethan paused, carefully choosing his response. Mommy made some decisions that hurt our family, he said gently, but that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. She just needs time to figure things out for herself. Emma nodded, her young mind still processing the complexities of adult relationships. I'm glad we're all together now, she whispered, wrapping her arms around Ethan's neck. I am too, he replied, holding her close. Ethan also began to reclaim parts of himself that had been buried under the weight of his marriage. He took up jogging again, rediscovering the simple pleasure of running through the quiet streets of their neighborhood at sunrise. He found solace in woodworking, crafting small projects in the garage with Liam. whose curiosity and eagerness reminded Ethan of himself at that age. Professionally, Ethan threw himself into his work with renewed energy. His colleagues noticed the change, often commenting on how focused and driven he seemed. "Whatever you're doing," one of them joked during a meeting, "keep it up. You're on fire these days." What Ethan didn't say was that his drive came from a deep sense of purpose. For the first time in years, he felt in control of his life. He wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. Melissa's absence became less pronounced as time went on. She moved into a small apartment across town and began visiting the children once a week under the custody agreement. These visits, though brief and supervised, were fraught with awkwardness. Emma and Liam often returned from them quiet and subdued, as if unsure how to process the divide between their parents. Ethan did his best to fill the gaps Melissa left behind, taking on roles that weren't always easy, but were necessary. He became the parent who braided Emma's hair before school and helped Liam navigate the intricacies of middle school friendships. Each small victory, a successful math test, a perfect pirouette at ballet practice, reminded Ethan that his sacrifices were worth it. One evening, as Ethan watched the kids play in the backyard, a deep sense of gratitude washed over him. He had lost so much, yet he had gained something far more valuable: the unshakable bond between him and his children. They were a team, united by love and resilience. Liam called out to him, holding up a soccer ball, "Dad, come play." Ethan grinned, setting his book aside. "You're on, buddy." They played until the sun dipped below the horizon, their laughter echoing in the cool evening air. As Ethan scooped Emma up and spun her around, he realized that this was what mattered most. Not the betrayal, not the heartbreak, but these moments of pure, unfiltered joy. Months later, Ethan sat in the audience at Emma's school play, his heart swelling with pride as she recited her lines with confidence. Liam sat beside him, cheering louder than anyone else when Emma took her bow. After the show, Emma ran into Ethan's arms, her smile radiant. "Did you see me, Daddy?" she asked breathlessly. "I wouldn't have missed it for the world," Ethan replied, hugging her tightly. As they walked to the car, Liam carrying Emma's bouquet of flowers, Ethan felt a quiet contentment settle over him. Life wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, still moments of doubt, but it was theirs to build together. Ethan glanced at his children, their laughter filling the cool night air, and smiled. In the end, they had found their way back to what truly mattered: love, trust, and the promise of brighter days ahead.